So now we move to the George Robertson presentation. This has become a wonderful feature of the AGM in the last few years. It's when we recognise 30 years of service in the publishing industry, which really is an incredible achievement for anyone. So it's very exciting to acknowledge the recipients of the George Robertson Awards. I should mention that we have a new award, which is a George Robertson Honourable Mention Award, which recognises retiring publishing professionals who have made a significant contribution to the Australian publishing industry, but perhaps who haven't clocked up the 30-year criteria for the George Robertson Award. So, Michael, I'd like to hand over to you to talk us through this year's recipients.
Thank you, James. Yes, 30 years of distinguished service, and we will show you their pictures and I will tell you a little bit about them. The first person is Pam Brewster, publisher at Hardy Grant. Pam Brewster has worked in publishing for over 40 years. She started in Penguin Books, designed in Melbourne, moved to London, came back, set up her own studio, worked for leading Australian publishers, won countless awards, including the Joyce Nicholson Award for Best Designed Book of the Year. Never quite content as a designer, she always wanted to publish. She admired in particular Lloyd O'Neill's mix of quality and commercialism, confident that you never have to compromise one to have the other. Her first publication was Bondi, a collection of short stories with writing by Margaret Whitlam, Robert Drew and Craig McGregor, amongst others, and stunning photography by Oliver Strew. She joined HarperCollins, published 50 titles a year, Charmaine Solomon, Lisa Curry, Nay Gibbs, often selling 50 to 70,000 copies. At Hodder and Stoughton, now Hachette, she published Andy Harris's Modern Greek, co-edition with Chronicle. She published real estate guru John McGrath's first book and went on to publish more bestsellers with him. Don't even suggest to her that Australian publishing is a colonial outpost. She joined Hardy Grant Books and loves its international success, taking Australian books to the world. And her recent successes include Maeve O'Mara's Food Safari series, sports books with Cadell Evans, Dustin Martin, Gary Ablett Jr., and managing complicated relationships with the SBS and the AFL. Pam loves publishing Australian books for Australia and the world, and she's become a spirit and mentor to others the way Lloyd O'Neill was to her. She's a deserving recipient of the George Robertson Award. Tracy Cheetham, Publicity and Marketing Director for Pan Macmillan. Tracy started work at Pan Macmillan in 1989. She's worked in product, marketing and publicity, and she's now Publicity and Marketing Director, leading and mentoring her team to build targeted and effective campaigns through television, radio, press and online, through promotions, to produce display material and to find cross-marketing opportunities, to run author tours and events. Tracy is an incredible leader, a generous colleague, and an exceptionally talented publicist and marketer. She's worked with the biggest and the most enduring authors, Leanne Moriarty, Matthew Riley, Hannah Kent, Marcus Zusak, John Marsden and Di Morrissey, and best-selling internationals like Bret Easton Ellis and Alan Hollinghurst. For more than 30 years, Tracy has championed books and authors, built brands, and inspired colleagues. She's deeply respected by those colleagues and industry peers who say she has unfailing passion, incredible expertise, an unstinting work ethic, resilience, charm, warmth, and positivity. No wonder then she's now a director of Pan Macmillan, and within Pan Macmillan and for the whole Australian publishing industry, she's a great leader and colleague and another worthy recipient of the George Robertson Award. Leanne Crummond, sales rep for Pan Macmillan. Leanne, also at Pan Macmillan, has been servicing the ACT and New South Wales as a sales representative and at the same time handling a large, diverse telemarketing territory across the whole nation. Leanne is described as having unwavering commitment, attention to detail and enduring enthusiasm. She's a supporter for authors, colleagues and booksellers across a range of places: Parliament House, gift suppliers, DDSs, large franchise stores or tiny news agencies. She supports them all. On window displays, on book club recommendations, on after-hours appointments, She's made very, very long drives and done vast amounts of research. She's known as versatile and talented. She's been a champion of books across all genres. She's a voracious reader, and her knowledgeable and insightful and enlightening reviews have inspired and helped get books to readers. After nearly 33 years, colleagues say that for Leanne, it's still always about the books and the people, making genuine connections with bookselling partners and offering reliable and unstinting service. She's a deserving recipient of the George Robertson Award. Sally Devenish, production manager, Pan Macmillan. Her colleagues say her long, successful career managing that department has contributed enormously to the efficacy of Pan's publishing and its stability across years of technological change. They say Sally is tireless, collaborative, and generous, and that she is constantly looking for innovations to deal with production challenges. For books, for digital production, for covers, for internal material, she's negotiated consistently the best outcomes from local and international printers, and she delivers solid estimates so that cost effectiveness can be measured and print quantities decided. The production department is a publishing company's engine. It's complicated and complex, and it's often invisible when it's running well, but can be a catastrophe without a dedicated, determined driver. And Sally has been a dedicated and determined driver. Her skill, her experience, her relationships have ensured that requirements are known, production's on time, and accounts reconciled. After more than 30 years, she's still meticulous and creative, and across every aspect of the book's journey from beginning to end, and a deserving recipient of the George Robertson Award. Clive Jackson is the account manager, South Australia, for Penguin Random House. In 1989, he became a rep for Transworld in South Australia. He moved to Random House and has been with the same company through mergers and changes for more than 30 years. His colleagues say it's a small sign of his loyalty and commitment, that he loves what he does, that he's passionate about selling, passionate about books, a ferocious reader, and passionate about his customers. He is known widely as being very supportive of others in the business, and especially of authors who visit his area, including, once a year, becoming a full-time publicist when it's time for the Adelaide Writers' Festival. He'll spruik a book to anyone who will listen. He's never short of a word or a review. He has incredible energy and is popular and widely respected by his colleagues and by his booksellers. He is another worthy recipient of the George Robertson Award. Karen Reid is a launch director for Penguin Random House. Karen started working in the industry straight out of high school. Spent 5 years at the Constant Reader Bookshop while pursuing a BA in communications. She was promoted after 2 to weekend manager, and she was instrumental in setting up their newsletter. Karen joined Transworld Publishers as a publicity assistant, worked her way up to senior publicist until the merger with Random House, worked in publicity and marketing, and then head of publicity and marketing. And now she's the publicity director of Penguin Random House. She's worked on campaigns with E.L. James, Dan Brown, Bill Clinton, Michelle and Barack Obama, James Patterson. I've had to leave out half of these. The list is extraordinary. She's toured with Lee Child, Richard Dawkins, Ben Elton, Jane Fonda, Julia Gillard, Sir Edmund Hillary, Nigella Lawson, David Malouf, Armistead Maupin, Olivia Newton-John, Michael Palin, and Terry Pratchett. She's worked with Booker Prize winners. If you're working with her in a Booker Prize winner, don't think you're special. She's worked with Barnes, Carey, Doyle, Enright, Flanagan, Keneally, McEwen, and Rushdie. And she's been part of the Sydney Book Publicity Group since its inception. She's been on the organising committee or a judge for several years at the ARBIAs and the Australian Reading Hour. She's a generous lecturer and presenter for the APA and for Masters in Publishing courses, and Karen has made a significant contribution to Australian publishing. Her colleagues say she's highly organised, professional, and cares passionately about her authors. Richard Flanagan and Karen herself say her itineraries are a work of genius. She's a worthy recipient of the George Robertson Award. Denise Ryan, director and publisher, Denise Ryan and Associates. Denise started working as a primary school teacher, but then started working in educational publishing as a commissioning editor for Methuen to give an outlet for her interests and skills in literacy and literature. She's been a commissioning editor, publisher, and publishing director at Methuen, at Rigby, and at Pearson. She's been involved in many international publishing projects and always made sure that Australian and New Zealand children would recognise themselves and their environment in the finished product. She's been a keen participant in conferences, including at Bologna and at the International Reading Association, which is now the International Literacy Association in its various places, especially in Chicago. She's been a frequent organizer at those events of networking and social opportunities, including an apparently renowned annual Waifs and Strays drinks evening. She's had more than 36 years focused on and delivering improved reading outcomes for children in Australia and around the world. Denise is known throughout the industry as an innovative publisher and a generous mentor. She's been heavily involved in, even president of, the Australian Literacy Educators Association. Some time ago, she began her own publishing business, Denise Ryan and Associates, I think in 2006. And since then, she's continued to create beautiful and sound literacy materials for children in the US, in Canada, and Australia. A worthy recipient of the George Robertson Award. The last George Robertson, Erica Wagner, consulting publisher for Allen & Unwin, and now freelance. She was a trainee editor at Penguin Books in 1988, which doesn't sound like it should be 30 years ago, but there you go. Swiftly after that, she became an associate publisher, instrumental in developing a market for YA literary fiction in Australia. Sonia Hartnett, Melina Marchetta, Isabel Carmody, Maureen McCarthy. She started her own company, Silverfish, and when it was later bought by Allen & Unwin, Erica and her prestigious list, including Judith Clark's Wolf in the Fold, became part of Allen & Unwin. A champion of quirky, illustrated and of sophisticated picture books, working with authors and illustrators like Lee Hobbs, Paul Jennings, Terry Denton, Craig Smith and Armin Grader. She was also the powerhouse behind Australia's first literary graphic novels for children. Erica has been passionate about First Nation stories. She was an early advocate for bringing Indigenous voices to a mainstream audience through books like Buri Monty Pryor's Maybe Tomorrow and Mary Malbunka's When I Was Little Like You. Erica left Allen & Unwin at the start of 2020 to pursue her own art practice and other publishing opportunities. She's currently a consultant and project manager for several publishers. She's also co-director of boutique graphic novel imprint 12 Panels Press, who are publishers of the acclaimed graphic novel Still Alive by Safdar Ahmed, and she's now illustrating her first picture book, Hope is the Thing, written by Joanna Bell. She's championed innovative creators, she's shaped and changed Australian children's publishing, she's nurtured the careers of writers and illustrators, and been a cutting innovator, a risk taker, and a creative thinker. She's also a past winner of the Dromkeen Medal and the Pixie O'Harris, and needs a George Robertson to add to her collection. As James mentioned, there's a special recognition on retirement for Phil Knight. Phil hasn't quite made the distance to qualify for a George, but he recently retired, and after the pandemic, his colleagues have persuaded the APA to add a special acknowledgement to this list. Phil was a trained accountant from Broken Hill and spent most of his early career in the mining industry. If he'd started with books, he'd have a George. He was lured to books eventually by Malcolm Edwards and Peter Eichhorn to lead Hodder Headline and Allen & Unwin's newly established joint venture, Alliance Distribution Services. He brilliantly managed distribution for many publishers, including Hachette, Allen & Unwin, New South, Thames and Hudson, Faden, Affirm and Major Street over his 21 years there. Under his watch, ADS distributed some of the biggest books of his time, Harry Potter and Twilight, for example, but never broke an embargo. There was also expansion, new technology, wild weather, and occasionally a snake under the pallets, and even once a robbery. It wasn't dull, but Phil always managed with his easy, Broken Hill smile and calm ways. And in the last couple of years, Phil took his team through the very worst of times, COVID and a logistics failure. The smile, apparently, according to his colleagues, might not have been quite so easy, but he rose to every challenge, even with retirement on the horizon. He's made an exceptional contribution to the book industry and is already missed by his colleagues at ADS and Hachette and his friends throughout the industry. Apparently, one of them has run into him recently, completely by accident, they say, at a wine tasting in the Hunter. So he can be found. And that's the end, James.
Can I just thank all of the recipients for their long service and impressive service to the industry. It really is an extraordinary reminder of the depth of experience and talent in the industry, and just what that brings to a successful kind of publishing industry. We wouldn't be the industry that we are today without the service that you've put in over the last 30 years. So thank you all for everything that you've done. I know that there was not necessarily mention of retirement except for Phil. So perhaps there'll be a few more years yet, because the continuity of what you bring is very valuable to us, and we thank you all for it.